Hello friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Michelle Fondin and I'm the author of 11 published books, including this latest book, The Empowered Divine Feminine, Becoming an Unstoppable Woman in the 21st Century and Beyond. If you're new to my channel, welcome. Thank you for subscribing below. Click on the bell, scroll up to all for all notifications. And thank you for giving the video a thumbs up. I do readings, tarot, and now astrology readings. You can get information on all the readings I do at my website, michellefondinauthor.com. Welcome to my brand new series on overcoming codependency in relationships. This series is going to be quite long. It may take the entire year of 2024, and I will be posting one video a week pertaining to this particular topic because it's something that I see so often in my one-on-one coaching sessions, and it's something that I too have experienced throughout my life and overcome. The topic for today's video is the 3 dependencies in relationships, or codependency, dependency, interdependence. It's all having to do with relationships with others. So I'm going to define each of these so that you may better be able to fully understand the differences between them as we get started on this series. Now, if you would like to follow along, chapter 6 in this book, The Empowered Divine Feminine, outlines becoming empowered in relationships. And so much of this material has been directly taken from my new book. So let's just backtrack. I know some of you are new to the channel, so I'm just going to tell a little bit about my story and why this topic of codependency is so incredibly important for me to be able to teach to you. Well, I had been codependent my entire life, and of course, I didn't even know the word. I didn't know there was any other way to be. And when it came to romantic relationships, the major problem I had was choosing people who were codependent, and therefore my half of the story was the other half of codependency. Now, this didn't come in isolation because I grew up with a very codependent parent. And so you can see the patterns in my life that culminated to the fact that about 10 years ago, give or take a year, I learned what the term codependency was, what it meant, and then I began in earnest to correct that behavior. Now, it has taken me years to really be able to outline which behaviors are exactly codependent and which behaviors lead me to create those tendencies or choose people that keep you, or me in this case, in that codependent bind. So this is coming from my knowledge, what I have read, what I have taught, what I've written about, and then down to the one-on-one coaching with my clients and what I have been teaching in so many things, including my twin flame boot camps as well, which are pre-recorded sessions, pre-recorded courses, if you will. And so I talk a lot about this topic. So let's get started with really understanding the differences in dependency in relationships in order for you to fully grasp, why am I here learning about codependency? So let's start with the first word, which is dependency. Dependency in and of itself is not bad. It's not a bad thing. When you were a baby and you had no other choice to get food, water, to get changed, to get clothed, to have shelter, you needed to be dependent on your parents. You absolutely had to, or your caretakers. And so being dependent when you have no other way, when there is no other way to be, because you as a child did not have the capacity to care for yourself on your own. And so we need other people in those cases to take care of us. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, maybe you have a parent or a grandparent or a great-grandparent who has dementia or Alzheimer's or is handicapped or has some other physical ailment which does not allow them to take care of themselves, to dress themselves, to feed themselves, to use the restroom by themselves, to bathe themselves. In that case, that person is totally dependent on a caretaker to help them take care of those basic needs. So that is dependency. Now let's go to the second one, which is actually the third one, which is interdependence. So interdependence is the healthiest form of relying on each other in a relationship to fulfill certain needs, not all needs, and certainly not the basic needs, but it's relying on each other in a healthy way, meaning you're healthy, the other person is healthy, you can provide for your needs in some way, shape, or form, that other person can provide for their needs in some way, shape, or form, but then you come together to form a relationship because we are social creatures after all. This is something that I teach and preach. I don't talk about independence in the sense that we need to live on an island and live alone and be 100% independent, because that's not reality and it's not what we were created for. We're social creatures. We need each other. We need each other for love, affection, attention, to be in direct relationship with, for our emotional health, our physical health even, our spiritual health. And so we do need each other. But the best and healthiest relationship of any type is an interdependent relationship where you are a whole person, where you have your self-love, self-ownership, self-worth, self-respect, and that other person does too. And it does require many things like having healthy boundaries, for example. And it does have to do with having self-ownership, if you will. And not many people are able to have the education within them to be able to have an interdependent relationship. And we're gonna go a lot more into that in this series as well. The third type, which is really the second type, is a codependent relationship. Because if we're talking about the hierarchy of dependency, really at the very bottom is dependent. That's a baby or an elderly person or a handicapped person, if you will. And then there is the intermediary, which is the codependent. And then there's the highest form, which is interdependent. Codependent is what we are talking about in this series. But of course, as we talk about codependence, we also talk about dependence and interdependence because they are related in some way, shape, or form. Codependence is when two people of any type come together and they are trying to fill a void in each other. So in themselves, they don't feel like a complete person. They have a sense of having a void or not having enough self-love, self-worth, self-respect, and not having proper boundaries. And they come together with another person, albeit a lover, friend, relative, whatever, in order to fill a void. Now, this is usually a very subconscious act. And let me tell you this right now, that this is the most common form of dependence bond that there is, especially for adults. Now, it does happen in a child-adult relationship, and that's usually how it gets started, if you will. But it is the most common way we act and interact as human beings. Now, you might be wondering, why? Why is this the most common one? Well, it's the most common one because we have not been taught another way. So if you were taught by your parents who were very codependent, they were taught by their parents who were codependent, and so on through the generations, it's just a trait, it's a behavioral pattern that is passed down through the generations. And as we unfold in this series, you will begin to fully understand why, by far, this is the most common type of dependency. As unfortunate as it is by far the most common. Now, the great news is today, many of us are becoming awakened to another way. Many of us are becoming awakened to the fact that interdependence is the best way to go about a healthy relationship and that codependence is extremely unhealthy. But the first part of moving from codependency to interdependence is to realize your part in the codependent relationship. And that is often the sticky wicket. And then here's why, because most of us, myself included, most of us who find ourselves in a codependent relationship that is utterly painful, because many of us have these codependent relationships, but they're not primary relationships. And so because they're not primary relationships, we don't feel the pain, or we don't feel the annoyance of that as much as when it's a primary relationship. A primary relationship that is codependent might be a mother, father, a sister, brother, or a boyfriend, girlfriend, or a spouse. And when we have those really close-knit relationships with someone, and it's more or less a primary relationship in our life, we feel the effects of codependency so much worse. Now, as I mentioned, there are two sides to codependency because nothing is in isolation in relationships. And those of us that suffer or realize the suffering in a codependent relationship might be thinking that it's the fault of the other person. So oftentimes the reason why we stay stuck in codependency and we can't move on to interdependence is because we don't want to take a look at our part in it. We don't want to take a look at ourselves. We tend to blame the other person for the codependent relationship. We say that person's a narcissist, that person abuses me, that person abuses drugs, alcohol, whatever the case may be, or that person keeps trying to lay a guilt trip on me, or they try to blame me for things in their life, or they try to shame me. So the ultimate focus in a codependent relationship is on the other person, hence the term codependent, because it's often about projecting or looking at that other person's life and focusing a lot more on the other person's life than your own life. So I'm going to just give you a really subtle way that you can recognize why codependency is so incredibly common, and it is by far the most common of all relationship dynamics. So if you ever are jealous, if you're ever possessive, if you are ever chasing or trying to hold on to someone, those are all codependent behaviors. And if you, again, are blaming another person for the reason why you feel a certain way in a relationship, that is codependency. If you have ever in your whole entire life, if you've ever tried to guilt someone into doing A, B, or C for you, or if you've ever tried to guilt someone into being in a relationship with you, or if you've ever tried to manipulate anyone into doing anything for you or being in a relationship for you, rest assured you are guilty of codependency. So as you can see, because it seems to be a more globally accepted way of being, most of us just have no idea that that is what codependency is. It's the most common. Most people act in this way. In order to not act in this way, you really have to transcend a lot. You really have to learn brand new behaviors. You really have to do a lot of self-reflection, self-work, and learning your part in the codependent relationship. I'll give you one example before we close off this video because there's so much to be said here. And I'm really going to try as hard as I can to make each video a singular topic related to codependency, even though it's going to be hard because there is just so much material that I would love to cover for you so that you can begin to change that mindset from codependency into interdependence as a relationship dynamic. When I was in a relationship with an alcoholic person for 5.5 years, I write about this in my book, Help, I Think My Loved One's an Alcoholic, a survival guide for lovers, family, and friends. And I'll put that picture here so you can look it up on Amazon if that's the case for you in one of your relationships. I was in that relationship with that person for 5.5 years. Now, for the first year, I did not know what was going on. I didn't know about the word codependence or codependency. I did not know that was even a concept or a thing. I thought I was being a loving person, a helpful person, that I was trying to help this person see the error of his ways. I was trying to help him see that he was an alcoholic or addict, even though he had been in stark denial about it. And I did everything I could in my power to try to help him, to get him to change. And it really wasn't until about 1.5 years into that relationship that I began to learn the concepts of codependency. But even then, I didn't see my own behavior in it. Well, 2 years down the road into that relationship, this person had moved into my home because he was going to a detox and detox from alcohol and drugs. And he checked himself out of detox early. Now, he told me he was let go on good behavior, which is totally ridiculous. They don't do that with detox. Because he had all of his stuff in my house, I expected him to come back to my house. But he actually didn't come back to my house. He went back to his old apartment where his landlord / roommate had tons and tons of alcohol in his apartment. And when I went there, he wasn't even there. And in fact, he had holed up in a hotel with another druggy friend and was getting wasted, and I discovered that he was actually there. So here's where it gets super duper duper crazy, and where I had the aha moment that I was probably the crazier one. So at that moment, I took all of his stuff, packed it into my car, drove to that hotel. I had an extra key for his car, and I opened up his car and I literally shoved everything I could into his car. And I went upstairs to the hotel room and just like lost it on him and went screaming and yelling and all the crazy stuff. And it was kind of at that moment when I was driving away from that situation that I realized how incredibly codependent and crazy I had become, because I had been trying so hard to change another person who didn't want to change. And so then I had to really step back and realize my part of the problem. Why did I feel I needed to fix someone else? Why did I feel that I needed to heal someone else? Why did I feel I needed to take responsibility for somebody else's bad behavior? And that is classic codependency. So there you go. If you've ever done anything crazy, to even a small amount of that with another person, trying to get them to change or budge or move or do whatever, doing a little dance around that person, that is codependency. So I hope that this video helped you to understand the differences between the dependencies and how codependency might affect your life, or maybe it's not affecting your life now, but it certainly did affect your life in the past. And if you would like to change your relationships or change your behaviors within those relationships, or even change the dynamics of a relationship so that you are having better relationships, then do stay tuned to these videos in this playlist. I want to thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for subscribing to my channel below. Click on the bell, scroll up to all for all notifications. And thank you for giving the video a thumbs up. Thank you for sharing this video with others who want to rock in their personal relationships. And thank you so much for your support of my channel. You can buy one of my 11 published books. And I have boot camps, meditation courses, all those things are in the link below at my website, michellefondinauthor.com. And I will see you in the next video.